Welcome back to International Finance. We are going through chapter 16 of Resnick and Chulun, which is about foreign direct investment, FDI, and cross-border M&As. Why do firms do the foreign direct investments? The third reason, is about product life cycle. So there are some countries who innovate first in a certain products, and then the product has a life cycle. So the country usually first innovated will have experienced early life cycle, and then life cycle first, and then there will be some lead lag effect. Other countries will follow after a certain period of time, and then as time goes by, you first produce in your home country, and then as the life cycle matures more, and then the new other countries started to adopt your products, then you can move your production facility to the other countries consequently. So US firms develop new products in the developed world for a domestic market, and then markets expand overseas, right? And FDI takes place when product maturity hits and cost becomes an increasingly important consideration for the multinational corporations. So here's a very interesting example, or old-time example, but there is a reason why I show you this one. Here you see a Singer sewing machine, 재봉틀 in Korean terminology, right? Have you ever seen this kind of things in your family, right? I've seen in my family before, like when I was a small kid. My mom used to do this, 재봉틀 thing to make my shirts, and a long time ago. And then whenever there is something she has to sew, she was using it. So I remember this sweetly. Anyway, the thing is, who invented this? Well, Mr. Singer, Isaac Merritt Singer. Like in early 19th century, he was born in 1811, and then he was an American inventor, actor, and businessman. You can see quite a diverse and colorful career by his picture over here. You see it, right? Very rich man, of course, right? But he is well talented, and then I guess he is really interesting character with pleasant interpersonal skills, I guess. He made important improvements in the design of the sewing machine, and was the founder of what became one of the first American multinational businesses. You can find this in the Wikipedia, right? And then sewing machine, well, before this guy, right, the sewing machines were there, but it was huge, so that you cannot take it in your home. It was for factory machines, right? Don't want to make your family as a factory, right? But make it smaller, so that all the ladies and then gentlemen, they can just do it in their home as a hobby or whatever, right? He brought it home with this new design, right? Very innovative one, very successful business, started in America, but product life cycle tells what? Well, you first make it hit in your country, home country, and then 10 years later, maybe, the other countries will be interested, the people in other countries will be interested in this product, and they start to buy up, right? Of course, this kind of expansion into new market must have taken longer time, right? 200 years ago. Nowadays, it's the information age. Next day, they will know about it, or simultaneously, they will learn about your cool products. So this kind of life cycle story may not hold that much these days, but still, right? But what is interesting about it is his personal life, right? It's kind of a sidekick, but is a good, interesting thing to notice here. Singer, the Isaac Singer, had many wives and mistresses all around the world. Why? He was a successful businessman, and then successful businessmen, usually they are funny when they talk to people. They have good communication skills to entertain those people that you meet, right? And then very entertaining. So that when and then international businessman by nature, he had to travel a lot. And then traveling is not just a 1 day or 1 week trip. like what you experience these days or before pandemic, right? There was no planes, right? Airplanes. It was a ship that you have to travel for a year or two from America to Europe, all different countries in Europe, and wherever he goes, he sells this sewing machines and then ideas, and together with it, you're not just talking about your business ideas. That's too serious. You have to go to that socializing events, and then the high society gets in there. You have to get in there and then meet new people, and then together with it there came unintended consequences, more or less, right? Having a lot of concubines here and there in the cities, all right? In Europe. And his second wife turns out to be Miss Isabelle Eugenie Boyer, right? A French woman, a 19-year-old French woman whom he had lived with in Paris when he was staying there in 1860. She left her husband, original husband, and married Isaac, who was then 50 years old. Oh my God. And he looked like this. And then you can see that she was very good looking and a model. She was a model, right? And then you can, the reason I bring this picture to you is that, do you find this picture and then this face a bit familiar to you by any chance? This is my question. And then, as it turns out, yes, she, right, may be familiar to you, right? The reason is because she's, reportedly, she was a model, okay? For the sculptor Bartoldi, right, who designed the Statue of Liberty for the United States, right? 자유의 여신상, the Statue of Liberty, that face is her face, and then she's the second wife of Isaac, sewing machine guy, the singer. Yes. So one interesting US history as well as European history, and then international finance, right? Product life cycle, you see it in the US and then less advanced countries in that product, right? You experience the upward going in the life cycle of your product first, and then the consumption goes, right? And then this is a time when you export it, and then belatedly other countries follow and then by that time your country's demand or production will go down, right? And production goes down, and you start to export. In this period, but by and by you start to produce outside your countries, right, to satisfy the demand of your other counterparty countries, right? So that's the idea of it, the wave, time, lead, and lag, right? Singer sewing machine, oh my God. And product life cycle, right? Statue of Liberty, right, by the way. It should be noted that the product life cycle theory, by the way, the Statue of Liberty thing, and then the this guy, singer sewing machine. Another thing to tell you is that 주식회사, the stock, right, common stock, the ownership of this company, right, it has to do with the ownership of the companies as well. Given that he had so many wives and many children, 24 children, right, left behind, right? Guess how much troublesome it could have been when he was passing over the ownership of the company to 24 different children, and then his wives or concubines all around the world. One spouse is good enough of a trouble for you, right? So all this fighting among these, family members, right? You can imagine that kind of trouble, but rather it was resolved rather less troublesome, because he split his ownership into this stock ownership, how many shares to each different persons, right? So don't fight. And that was how we resolved the situation, together with the lawyers, right? The legal dispute, right? was there. But that's how the lawyers make money. And then the stocks, right? Common stock and then publicly traded company stocks makes your life easier, right? Just split it and give it to your sons and daughters. That's it. Anyway, it should be noted that the product life cycle theory was developed in the 1960s when the US was the unquestioned leader in R&D and product innovation. Increasingly, product innovations are taking place outside the US as well, and new products are being introduced simultaneously in many advanced countries, and production facilities may be located in multiple countries from product innovation. Nowadays, K-pop, not only that, but also, Naver webtoons, right? There is a kind of a product life cycle I can think of, right? You first hit in, make it big in Naver's webtoon, cartoon business, right? And then the life cycle goes on, and then it propagates into other industries like movie making or American drama like Netflix, right? One story makes a big hit in Naver webtoon, and then that kind of intangible asset of this product life, right? Product is purchased by other Hollywood filmmakers so that they produce it in Naver, the Netflix, right? Drama in the US or whatever. Okay, so it goes on and propagates. Okay, that's something you can think about. Anyway, the shareholder diversification, firms may be able to provide indirect diversification, right? This is the fourth reason or fifth reason, right? Shareholder diversification is the reason. Portfolio management reason, right? Idiosyncratic risk gets reduced. I mean, you don't have to worry about idiosyncratic risk, okay? It doesn't mean that idiosyncratic risk itself gets disappeared, but you don't have to worry about. The idea is you don't have to worry about idiosyncratic risk as long as you hold a portfolio, multiple different assets, okay? Can take care of you. Only systematic risk matters, right? By holding a portfolio. But the idea here is that instead of company by company portfolio, why don't the company itself becomes a portfolio? Okay, company itself becomes a portfolio that has international exposure, one country or other countries, right? All different countries' risk, idiosyncratic component of that, right, will be canceling each other out so that your company's itself will have a diversification itself, right? Firms may be able to provide indirect diversification. We call it indirect diversification because this is the company level diversification instead of the investor level diversification. So you don't, as an investor yourself, you don't have to worry about diversifying your portfolio, okay, too much. So indirect diversification to their shareholders if there exist significant barriers to the cross-border flow of capital, and then capital market imperfections are of decreasing importance, however. And then managers, therefore, probably cannot add value by diversifying for their shareholders, as the shareholders can do so themselves at lower cost. What we are trying to argue over here is originally diversification mergers, right? Diversification mergers or international diversification. One of the explanation like 30 years ago was that, well, the shareholders, right? They may be limited. They may be incapable of diversifying their portfolio into international market. So Andy Kim, he may be focused much more in domestic market, and then he would be less efficient in investing in US stocks like 30 years ago or 20 years ago or like 5 years ago, right? It was difficult. So international diversification, I as an individual investor, I cannot do it too much. So in that sense, why doesn't the company itself diversify it, internationally, so that that will make me happy, right? Individual investors, right? That was the idea. But that was when the capital market was imperfect, and then nowadays, American stocks everybody invested in, right? Tesla or whatever. So it's less of a concern these days. Now, cross-border merger is another form of FDI. One of the FDI was, typical one, that is greenfield investment. You yourself, right? Start from the scratch and set up the factory and then, set up your distribution channel over there, right? With your own money. Hiring there some people, right? Cross-border acquisition is instead you take over some existing companies in that foreign country. Purchasing of existing business, it represents about 40 to 50% of FDI flows, and cross-border acquisitions are politically sensitive issue. Okay, greenfield investment is usually welcomed, but that you create jobs there. Cross-border acquisition is often unwelcome because there is a takeover issue about the brand and then the national security issues and political interest and then those nationalistic sentiment, all these different things gets in over there. Foreign like US company or Japanese company or Chinese company taking over, let's say, Samsung. Oh my God, the nationalistic sentiment will burn up. And then they will try to resist something, right? Politicians don't want that kind of things. So that's the thing, right? For example, if Samsung takes over Huawei in China, would Chinese people welcome that idea? Is a big question, right? They will also, like Huawei means like China does something. Hua means China, right? And Wei means do. China do something, and then Korean company takes over Huawei. Unimaginable, they will say. And then kind of a sentiment will burn up, all right, in whatever direction it may be. So that's the reason why, partly, and then a lot of the things gets involved. Anyway. Cross-border mergers and acquisitions in recent years, a growing portion of FDI has taken the form of cross-border mergers and acquisitions, accounting for more than 50% of FDI flows in terms of dollar amount. And the rapid increase in cross-border M&As deals can be attributed to the ongoing liberalization of capital markets and the integration of the world economy. So liberalization of capital markets, foreigners investment, right? Foreigners capital flow, right? Capital flows from the foreign monies, right? People become more open, and then that's why. And then as a mode for FDI entry, cross-border M&As offer two key advantages over a greenfield investment, which is the speed and access to proprietary assets, right? Secrets or R&Ds. For example, like Geely, the 公共汽车, like Geely 汽车 of China, like the car company, took over Volvo, of Swedish motor company. The Swedish motor company, Volvo, must have had a lot of R&Ds in terms of safeties, right? Volvo has a reputation for its strong car body, right? So that kind of R&D ideas, right? And then the patents would be taken over together with this, right? So Chinese companies. And then that's proprietary asset. And then speed, right? The brand equity, it took 100 years or more to build up that strong reputation or brand equity of Volvo. But instantaneously, you took over that company, and that brand and that image becomes yours, Chinese company. Now, popular mode of investment for firms wishing to protect, consolidate, and advance their global competitive positions. And then synergistic gains are obtained, right? Synergy, M&A is about synergy, right? How to value those synergy is an issue in valuation. But anyway, synergistic gains are obtained when the value of the combined firm is greater than the standalone valuation of the individual firms, right? Acquiring and target companies. And then it may or may not arise from cross-border acquisitions depending on the motive of the acquiring firms. Now, firms may decide to acquire foreign companies to take advantage of mispriced factors of production and to cope with trade barriers. The synergy value or valuation itself, right? Value itself is in the air. It's price is observable, the value is not, and value is something that you estimate, right? So the how much of a synergy do you perceive, right? It depends on the perception of the investors or the CEOs or the shareholders, whether they agree or not, and then all these kind of things. So there is a lot of room to make mistakes in valuing those synergies, right? You have to be careful about it. And cross-border M&As, there's a lot of chance that you can make mistakes of overestimating those synergies, or so you have to be careful. Cross-border M&A deals are most likely to involve firms with different national cultures, and then the cultural distance matters as well. There's a way of measuring the cultural distance. I'm going to talk about that in the later slides, so wait for that. But Hofstede's index is quite often used. Anyway, the idea is that you don't want to make trouble. I mean, culturally, your organization needs to have similarity. I mean, it's similar culture, easier to merge and then mingle with. Too much of a different culture. For example, one culture is more liberal and democratic, and the other culture is more chauvinistic, and then how do you say authoritarian culture, right? Like 독재자, right? Kind of, the dictatorship kind of culture versus democratic culture never mingles well together, right? Age discrimination in one organization, in Korean companies, right? So much age discrimination is there. I'm 1 year older than you, so you listen to my voice, and then I'm never going to work for a guy who is or who is younger than me, 1 year younger than me, or even 1 month younger than me. That kind of age discrimination mindset goes on in one organization. Never mingles well with very lateral or egalitarian culture, like 무슨 김영한 님 or whatever 님, right? Challenging all these ideas, right? That kind of this flat culture versus vertical culture never mingles well. So you have to be careful. Anyway, and then exhibit over here shows the cross-border M&A deals completed during this period, and then Vodafone AirTouch that happened in 2000, right? I still remember that. Businessmen and then Vodafone AirTouch communication companies, mergers and acquisition. The deal size was like $202 billion, historically the largest one in M&A, and then even until now, nothing was beating it, right? And then the deal size goes down the way, right, like this, and a lot of things happened, right? That you can check out in your textbook, Exhibit 7. So go ahead and watch it. And then the cultural index, you see Hofstede index over here, and then what you see on this table is the average wealth gains from cross-border acquisitions, foreign acquisitions of the United States firms. So country of acquirer of the US companies, Canadian company, Japan, UK, and other countries took over US, and then you see number of cases, right? Anglo-American culture, naturally UK companies was the most frequent ones. And then you see this average wealth gain versus average wealth gains of the targets and then acquirers, and then you see average wealth gains for combined ones, right? Usually for target companies, they gain wealth a lot, right? Why? Because there's a merger premium that the acquirers have to pay, right? For the existing shareholders. Let's say your stock is priced at $100 right now. you would not sell this stock unless you are given a lot of premiums, like 200 or 120, or at least a 20 to 30% a premium has to be paid to win your favor, right? So that's why the target shareholders gain, okay, unanimously, almost always, right? Acquirers, right? There's a winner's curse component in it, right? You end up paying too much, right? And then part of the reason maybe your CEOs may be overconfident. There's a whole bunch of papers talking about this overconfidence, and there's a whole discipline called behavioral finance, which I teach next semester. Very exciting one, interesting one, by the way, about how this overconfidence make the CEOs mistake, right? Especially in terms of acquisitions, and that acquisitions in the context of international mergers and acquisitions. And then UK versus US companies, why do they make so much mistake? Because they may be even more sure that oh yeah, Anglo-American, Anglo-Saxon culture, right? Anglo-American, we are the ones, right? We are ones. So I know that company very much, so I overpay. I know that synergy is so such and such. I'm sure about it, so they make more mistake. So that's perhaps why driving this kind of negative, wealth gain or wealth loss, right? And then cross-border acquisitions, foreign acquisitions of the U.S. firms. In contrast, Japan, right? When they do the acquisitions or acquiring U.S. companies, acquirers also make money. Not only the target makes money, okay? Perhaps that's because Japanese companies, there's a selection bias, right? In the first place, they are aware that there's a huge cultural difference that they have to be careful about. So, and then they are becoming more conservative when taking over the companies of significantly different cultures, right? So they try not to overpay too much, and then they they implement these acquisitions only when it is very sure. That's perhaps why both acquirers and the target shareholders gain wealth, right? And you see all these differences. And then Hofstede Cultural Index, that's something the strategy professors love it. You can use it, and then it's in hot in fashion in finance as well. Let me bring this website for you. Hofstede's index. Compare those countries, and then you can see the cultural index, right? Which country has which culture, that kind of things. How much two different countries are distant or close in terms of culture. They numerically quantify these things. It's a very interesting website, I will tell you. Political risk. So for this part, I'm going to talk about it in the next video. So wait for that one. So until now, thanks for watching it, and then see you. Bye-bye.